Welcome to the Horse Girl Gazetteer. Join Georgia and Kate as we dive into this week's conversation. From health and fitness to communication and understanding, we are determined to develop our maps and help you to develop yours. Hi, Kate.
Hello.
Welcome to our first podcast episode of the Horse Girl Gazetteer.
Very exciting.
Exceptionally exciting. I'm Georgia. I'm a lifelong horse girl, currently working on transitioning from being a youth rider to being an adult rider. I've always ridden horses throughout my entire childhood, and recently discovered the very rude fact that it is in fact hard to ride horses, which is not fair and very rude of it to be. You and I have talked about that a lot, about how that transition is difficult for so many reasons, and how universally hard it is, and how a lot of people could benefit from this conversation. So here we are, having that conversation and bringing it to more people.
Yeah, we talk a lot, and I talk with a lot of people. I'm an equestrian coach in Maine, and I particularly coach adults who are new riders or are returning to riding, and have a lot of very similar stories about the difference between riding as a kid and riding as an adult. It's pretty interesting because there's sometimes a little bit more fear in the adult riders compared to my kids. And at the same time, more investment in really understanding the process outside of the saddle, which leads to a lot of really interesting conversations, and also means that we end up talking about a lot of different tools for adult riders so that there's kind of a broader learning experience than just riding lessons. One of the things that I find, especially with adult riders, is that they have so much access to so much information that it also becomes difficult to kind of contextualize that information and kind of understand how it applies to their particular situation, which is really fun because we end up in really awesome conversations. And so part of our purpose with this podcast is to have a way to share some of those conversations with people and share some of the tools that we've come up with, myself as a trainer, as a professional, and also with Georgia as one of my riders. And one of those that's been really helpful for me, both as a professional and as somebody who is working with a lot of different riders with different situations, is to organize all of that information in kind of a map. So as maybe a mind map or a board game map or an atlas that organizes all of this information that we can find on the internet or TikTok or Facebook and all of the comments, to understand where we are and where we could kind of go with our learning process.
Yeah, you and I talked a lot about the title for this podcast, and we settled on Horse Girl Gazetteer because, first of all, it's just fun to say, and also because a gazetteer is that sort of searchable map. It has a geographic dictionary. It gives you a way to organize those concepts and those tools and look at how they relate to each other. And really importantly, it's not a series of steps, because learning anywhere, and especially with horses, is never linear, and progress is not going to be linear, so you're not going to need the same things day to day. So instead, you have a tool that can help you understand the relationship between your individual circumstances and universal information, like sitting the trot. If you want to be a Grand Prix rider, you're going to learn how to sit the trot, and if you want to be out on the trails, you're going to learn how to sit the trot. But how much time you put into sitting that trot and how much perfectionism you're looking to get out of it will determine who you train with, where you train, what horse you're riding, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a particularly interesting way to think about the learning process because it is very personal. So you are really creating your own map. Like, this is not me drawing out a map for you and handing it to you, although I would also love to do that. But it's going to be a much more useful tool if, you look at my map and then kind of think about your own experience and draw out your own map. Like, where have you been on this horse journey? What have you explored? You are the first explorer of your horse experience. Like, the landscape of your horse story is completely unique, which is absolutely a blessing and a curse. Because you are actually the only one who is going to have ever been there. But at the same time, you are exploring places that other people have been in their own way. And I think that is what is really special about the horse community, is that everyone has a very different story to tell, but also can contribute to everyone else's story. That can also make it really confusing because everybody's truth is going to sound slightly different. And so then how do we sort through that information shared with us either, by someone who is giving us unsolicited advice or someone who we reach out to as like a well-known, well-respected instructor who gives us feedback. How do we understand that feedback and how do we apply it to our own situation in a way that's productive and positive and moves us forward? One of the ways that I organize my map is into a couple of different domains. And, my map is continually evolving and being edited as I learn. So the chances that, I understand this differently in 5 years is high. But right now, I would maybe organize most of what I know into 5 domains that are all interconnected, which is the beauty of a map, is that it describes relationships. And I would probably start in the health domain, which I think would probably make sense to most people. This is going to include our horse's nutrition, our own nutrition. This is the body work that we do for our horses. This is the body work we do for ourselves. This is all of the basic horse care stuff, all the basic self-care stuff. And it's important to remember that it includes our mental and our physical health, which I'm sure will discuss at length
Definitely.
in future episodes. The next piece that is kind of most interesting to me and kind of my area of particular interest is the biomechanics. So the biomechanics of the horse, the biomechanics of the person, and the interface between the horse and the person. Lots to dig into there. That leads into the fitness piece. And of course, these tie together. The health and the biomechanics both have to be there in order to build fitness in the rider and in the horse. And then communication. So understanding horse psychology, understanding horse sociology, how horses speak horse, and then how can we kind of step into a relationship with a horse, understand them, and be understood by them, both on the ground and in the saddle. And there's so many different tools and ways of understanding all of that as well. And then I think the final piece would be the development of the horse and the development of the partnership. And my own leaning is towards dressage, and I would argue that dressage as a way of training is more universal than dressage as a discipline. A great example recently is that I saw an absolutely beautiful video of Buck Brannaman riding one of his bridle horses, and it is one of the most beautiful examples of dressage I have seen in a while. And it was so wildly inspiring to see that. So that was just an example of what wonderful development of a horse can look like.
Like you said, maps are really individual. Everybody has a different set of circumstances, different things happening. I have had a eventful map creation process, I think. I've ridden horses my entire life. My mom had a lesson barn when I was a teeny tiny little kid, and I learned to ride first on a little pony named Betsy May. She was a little Shetland, older than dirt when she came to us, and even older than that when she passed away. She was the sweetest horse on the face of the planet. Absolutely golden child. Only sound at the walk, so as soon as I was ready to do more than that, had to move up and away from her. But she was perfect. She taught several little kids how to ride. The next pony in my journey was Maverick, who I still have to this day, who has really brought me the joy of loving a horse and understanding what that relationship can look like and how they can piss you off and challenge you in every way possible and also be your best friend and just make you a better person in general. Maverick I've gone back to him between pretty much every single one of these horses. He's always been in my life, and he is my safe pony. Every time I go back and get on him, I will probably get tossed off, but it's also not going to hurt that bad, and it's fine, and it's just kind of funny. So that's that. While I was riding Maverick and had him as a kid, we also had a horse named Lucy who was being boarded at the barn, who I had access to. Pretty unrestricted, which looking back on, 10 to 12-year-old does not need unrestricted access to a horse. Me and my best friend got up to all sorts of shenanigans, all sorts of fun with the two of them going up the river and jumping logs that we had not scouted beforehand in the pasture, and several stories that I have told Kate that have made her question how I'm still alive today. But, you live and you learn. When I started getting back into horses more seriously was in late middle school, and I started taking lessons at a barn near my father's house, where I rode 2 lesson horses named Jed and Blackjack, who Blackjack was another one of those, like, older than dirt ponies, and Jed was this, like, big, slow, sweet guy who is just, like, barely the next step up from Blackjack. So the two of them helped me get into eventing. I had previously been riding hunter jumper, and so they were a very safe introduction to eventing, which I absolutely fell in love with, and quickly began to lease Andy, who is a adorable little 15 two-hand off-the-track thoroughbred who loved to jump and loved to be out and doing things, and we all swear he, like, knew what the color blue was. He liked to win. He had a good time, and that was obviously us also anthropomorphizing him, but who cares? It was fun. It was a blast. He taught me the joy of flying through a cross-country course so fast you think that you might die, but also you couldn't possibly fall off because you're going too fast. So that's not an option. You can't do that. You gotta stay on. Him and I won our schooling horse trials championship the year that I leased him, which was just a blast. That whole year I was learning how to ride dressage and how to event and how to be successful in that. And after I left Andy, I started riding this gorgeous schoolmaster named Twix, and her owner, who was also my trainer at the time, really taught me what it meant to be a dressage rider and to get really serious about it. Like I said, she was a schoolmaster, so she was perfect and could do everything, but would not unless you asked perfectly. And also, I was not allowed to try unless I could do it perfectly. Like, it was very clear you needed the muscles, you needed the skill. So that was definitely my most, like, regimented training I've ever been a part of, which I am eternally grateful for. I think it made me take myself a little bit more seriously. After her, I decided that I needed to walk away from that for some reason. I wanted to try something new, and I happened upon a horse named Moon Girl and was invited to train her. I was 16, and I had no business training her. She was a semi-feral Mustang who had gone through 6 trainers by the time I got to her, I think. But I was 16, and I was like, I can do that. I don't know that I can literally get killed by this horse. That's never happened before. It'll be fine. It was not fine. It was very bad. I ended up in the emergency room with her. I'm fine now, obviously, but it definitely absolutely shook me to my core. I have not been the same rider since. And Kate is very well aware of this because we've talked about it several times. It is the reason why when my current horse takes a misstep, I have to, like, talk myself down from a panic attack. It is still impacting me. But we all have to make some mistakes sometime, I guess. After Moon Girl, I had the opportunity to lease this very cute little paint pony whose name was LA, and she was just quirky enough to be fun and interesting, and also pretty safe. She never tossed me. She never made a move to toss me. She told me exactly what she thought about whatever we were doing, but in a way that was totally appropriate. We could totally get through it. It was totally fine. She was a nice little in-between. And then partway through college, I moved up to Maine, which is where I ended up connecting with Kate and Hideaway through a mutual friend from a previous barn who I posted on Facebook and asked, does anybody know anywhere who would be interested in trading work for lessons, maybe, please? I'm broke and 19. And she pointed me in Hideaway's direction where we ended up hitting it off, and they had this cute little pony who wasn't doing anything, whose name was Belle, and her and I had a blast together. She had very, very manageable dramatics. She just needed to move a lot and express her feelings loudly, but not dangerously. So I gained some of my confidence back with her. It was great. We had plans, and then she got EPM and COVID happened. So those plans fell apart, and I moved home. And when I came back to Maine, I had an opportunity to lease a very young off-the-track thoroughbred named Glitter. And I thought to myself, I can do that. I got my confidence back. I know how to ride a young horse. This will be great. And so I took her on. And once again, it was not. I was nervous all the time. I had overshot my confidence. I think I rode her maybe twice in the time that I had her, and ended up having to just say, nope, this was the wrong decision. I am in the wrong part of this map. I don't know how I got here. None of my tools are here, and I don't know what to do without them. So I sent her home, and I moved onto a horse that was at a barn that I was working at the time, whose name was Thunder, who was just like a lifeline. I was at the point where I was considering throwing in the towel and just walking away from horses entirely. I was not letting myself enjoy it, and I also was not taking myself seriously enough with it at the same time, which is like a really cruel combination of things to do to yourself. And I started riding Thunder, and there was just no pressure to it. He had been out of work for years. He had just kind of been the pretty boy in the pasture, just chilling and living his best life. And he was sweet and dumb enough to be easy to train, but also like wasn't too terribly spooky about anything, so it wasn't ever like an issue. And he was just there to have a good time, and I always loved riding him. And he saved my love for horses. And now I have fallen into ownership of the biggest, goofiest baby on the face of the planet. His name is Jules, after King Julian from Madagascar, and he embodies the goofy energy every day. He's a big dork. Really just kind of fell into owning him, and when I took him over, I thought he was 6. He was 3. And he's the best, and he challenges me in so many ways, and he makes me cry, but also makes me like full of love and hope for continuing in this sport, and has gotten me to like recommit in a way that I wasn't sure if I was ever going to. And so now that's where I'm at in my map now, is looking around and figuring out how the heck I'm going to get him and I from where we are to where we're going, which Kate is helping me build while also working on your own map.
I think it's super interesting to like hear your whole story.
Have you heard my timeline before? Laid out like
I know.
that?
I've definitely heard of all these horses. I don't know if I've heard them in this order specifically. I know all these stories, but it's interesting to think about them and think about them in the context of the map idea, as far as how, like, what was in your map at the time of each of those horses, and at the same time think about like where maybe like there wasn't enough content in the map for, you know, Glitter, for example. And like what
props to Kate, did try to talk me out of Glitter. did recognize that my map was not ready for a Glitter.
I did. But I think it's like very interesting, because you, like, I can tell you that, but it's actually your responsibility and part of your journey to like learn that for yourself to some extent. So it's an interesting tool, because I don't think we weren't talking about that concept at the time. If we had been, it would have been an interesting, different conversation. And I think that having the idea of kind of a horse knowledge map would have given you a lot more insight into
Oh, definitely.
glitter as a concept and you and glitter as a partnership.
Glitter.
And I don't know that would have necessarily meant sending her back or not. I think one of the things that's cool about the map idea is that it allows you to think about, like, okay, where are we as a partnership and what can we do? It doesn't have to be like we can't do. It can be about what is possible and what's not possible.
Oh, yeah. If I had been more honest with myself in that situation and more aware of the map, I think there's a chance I never would have brought her home, first of all.
Right.
Like, just right off the bat. But there's also a chance that I would have had the tools to think about what I needed in order to be successful with her.
Yeah. Which I think is just, it makes it a very useful tool because it can go either way.
Yeah.
It can go whatever way you need it to, basically. Because it's not really a set of rules. It's a way of thinking.
Right.
Which I think makes it really powerful.
What's in your map?
My map. Well, I started my obsession with horses about the same age that I was stuck in one of those little car seats. I think I had switched from the backward-facing car seat to the forward-facing car seat. And my house was close to the transfer station. And so once a week, my dad would drive me in his blue Ford with a bench seat, if I remember correctly. And he would drive me past Ruby. And Ruby, this was young enough that who knows if my memory is fabricated or how much of it is fabricated. But the story in my head about Ruby is that she was chestnut and quite elderly, fairly swayed back, a bit ragged looking. And we would drive past Ruby and it said Ruby on her little shed. And we would stop and I would just beg to stop and see Ruby and then refuse to get out of the car because I was afraid of her. And so absolutely obsessed with the idea of Ruby as a concept, but still somewhat nervous about the reality. So this continued for, several years. I'm sure at some point Ruby passed away. The obsession did not go away. And for my 11th birthday, I got riding lessons, which was probably the most expensive gift I've ever been given by my parents. And I can't be totally convinced they don't regret. So for my first riding lesson, my instructor, Barb, just handed me this horse Fawn. And I remember being kind of appalled and slightly horrified that all of a sudden I was alone holding on to the end of this very, very large creature. But off I went, and that was kind of the beginning of now, where I think I rode every week until I graduated from high school, and with a series of interesting horses. Similar to myself, Barb had ended up with horses. They came to her. And so after Fawn, I rode Marble, who taught me about falling off a few times and how that I would probably survive that. And then a series of interesting training horses that I got to be involved in their development, which was really cool. I rode each of them for varying lengths of time, but some horses who I'd never jumped, and I got to teach them about going over cross rails instead of straight through them, or one horse who had never quite learned how to load on a trailer, and so I got to learn about clicker training by teaching this young horse to get on, and then got to practice that at a horse show for about 6 hours, which at 15, I think, and completely alone at that point at the show, I think was a formative experience, mostly in patience and determination. We used an entire bag of carrots in the process, and we did get him on the trailer. We did get him home, which was deeply satisfying. But if I'd known then what I know now, maybe it wouldn't have taken quite so long. After I graduated from high school and the 4-H program, during that time, I went to Earlham College, which has a student-run co-op equestrian center. And that may or may not have been the reason for that choice of college. But while I was there, I was a manager of the farm and also started teaching some other students there, which was really fun. And I also encountered a local instructor who taught using the Ride with Your Mind method with Mary Wanless, which I thought was very interesting. And it was towards the end of my time, so I didn't really get to, I think I had like 2 lessons with her. But when I left school, I got my degree in neuroscience. I brought my horse and another horse back home. And when I had the opportunity to start teaching myself, I went and did teacher training with Mary Wanless so that I would have kind of a system to teach from besides just my own experience. So that's what's been kind of the foundation of what I've been teaching since then to kids and adults. And that, for a little bit more context, is very much based on biomechanics. So it's how to ride and how to understand your body and how it influences the horse's body. And a lot of strategies for visualizing and understanding the different feelings in the riding process. So it is not specifically a training system, right? It's not how to train a horse. It is how to sit on a horse in a way that makes their life easier and allows you to have influence on them and for them. So I started with that. I taught a lot of kids, and through a lot of trial and error, having various lesson horses with from various situations, kind of developed what we called our equine good citizen system for helping horses be rideable and safe and handleable for kids with very little experience, and really came to value being able to help horses be okay in their job, and make sure that they had the tools kind of emotionally and physically to do what we needed them to do, and to make sure they enjoyed it. And we had talked a lot about, like, well, we could teach people like the system. And then we met Lindsay from Harmony Horsemanship, who's been doing this much longer than we have. And we're like, well, Lindsay's already made the system. And we're very excited to learn her Harmony Horsemanship method of teaching people how to communicate with their horses. So that has been another big piece of my program since then, is teaching Lindsay's methods. I'm a level 3 Harmony Horsemanship certified instructor, which means that I have done some bridleless work and can teach that as well, which is great fun. The next piece of my program, somewhat more recently, has been kind of going back and investing a little bit more into my own riding myself, and found Heather Johnson, who is my local trainer, and I see her as often as I can here with my horses. And then also riding with JJ Tate virtually every month. And they have very similar philosophies, which is really great fun because I can work on the same things in slightly different ways with both of them. And the focus in that part of my education is really on getting a little bit deeper into the development and training of the horse, which is not part of what Mary teaches. Although excellent biomechanics is critical to developing a horse, that's not the focus of what Mary does. And I have really enjoyed and appreciated having more insight and more tools in understanding the process of teaching a horse the skills and building their fitness over time in that whole learning and training process. So I also was recently able to hire another trainer for my program here. And Savannah specializes in postural training and regulation and rehab work, which is another really interesting element of this whole picture, kind of going into that health piece of the map that we talked about earlier. And so she has been teaching me kind of how she works with horses on kind of returning horses to their spinal integrity and improving their spinal integrity, helping them become balanced both physically and emotionally, helping them learn to regulate themselves and to be able to be regulated. And so my next step kind of going forward with all of that is to put those pieces together and see if we can get my first horse, who is now 23 and was diagnosed with EPM, I think 7 or 8 years ago, to use all of these skills together and see if this year we can get him to his first recognized horse show, which is a fairly lofty goal, I think, given where we're at now, but would certainly be the culmination of a lot of learning over a lot of time. And I'm here for the process. So whether we actually get there or not is a little bit irrelevant to me. I think it will be just quite a wonderful journey, both to dedicate that time to him as my first horse, who has taught many, 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 many of my students over the years, and to put all these pieces together and see where that takes us.
I love it. We have 2 really cool maps that we can share about, I think.
Yeah.
I do want to spring a question on you
Go
a little
for
bit,
it.
which is just podcast focused. In your hopes and dreams, what would be exciting for you to come from this podcast?
I think that this like map idea is fairly unique. And I think that I would love for more people to have that as a tool. And I think it's a way to talk about horses and training them and kind of our shared experiences in a way that both allows us to access all of the work of the masters. Like, I don't need to reinvent the wheel here. I have access to so many incredible people who have done so many incredible things for horses, with horses, for riders. They've already got it. But I think that giving people different ways of accessing and understanding that information so that they can apply it to their own lives is something that I have to offer the horse world. And I think especially riders who are in that middle ground where they're maybe wanting to do more than casual trail riding on someone else's horses, but maybe are not planning on going to the Olympics. So that's not necessarily like in a high performance training program. I think those people sometimes kind of get the short end of the stick a little bit in terms of education, because it can be hard to access and then hard to interpret. They say experience is what you get right after you need it, which has just so much painful truth in it. And I think that we can help that process by having a way to share our experiences that makes it a little bit more useful and a little bit more meaningful.
I love that.
Is that an answer?
Yeah.
I think that's an answer.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good answer.
There's a lot of ways that the horse experience can be really miserable.
Yes. You and I
think it's part of the reality.
You and I have talked several times about how riding horses is actually not fun
most of the time. Yeah.
And it's not therapeutic most of the time. It's good for you in the long run, and it's good for you in your long run happiness, but it really does make you look at the weakest parts of yourself and work on them in order to be remotely successful, which is exceptionally hard.
Yes. I mean, it's about the hardest thing you can ask yourself to do is like care about something deeply and enough to want to face all of your demons.
Yes.
For it.
Yes.
That is hard. And the progress is so slow. And when it's going well, it is also extremely boring. Teaching is repeating. And JJ always says you chop wood and carry water. Like you repeat and you repeat and you repeat and you do it again. And a challenge on the long list of challenges in riding is finding joy and satisfaction and contentment in that, which means setting aside a lot of assumptions and setting aside a lot of ego and setting aside a lot of, stories that we tell ourselves about what success is and what success looks like and what it means to be a good rider and what it means to be a good horse owner. And we're always going to have those conversations with ourselves. But I would hope that we can alleviate some of the suffering of deciding to do this crazy thing, which is to get on a prey animal that doesn't speak our language at all.
Nope.
And learn about ourselves in that way so that we can understand them and can communicate with them.
One of the best things you said to me when I referenced happening into Jules, and it was a decision ultimately that I made to take him on. And when I was doing that, I was going back and forth because I was already in love with this horse, but I also wasn't sure that I needed a horse. And one of the best things you said to me was, are you trying to rationalize this? Because if we're going on logic, it's the bad idea. And that really just was like kind of a wake-up call for me. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So why not? Like, just jumped into it because at that point it was not about rationalizing it. It was about the fact that for some reason I and so many other people have decided that this is the thing that we're going to hang our hats on and like dive into and choose as an identity. Like, I really do tell people that I'm a horse girl, completely unashamed, kind of because I think it's funny, but also kind of because why the heck would I still be riding horses?
Right. Yes, it is. It is in so many ways just actually crazy.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense most of the time.
Financially, physically.
Right. It's a massive investment in every realm of existence, like your entire existence. And it is in many ways to do it well and to do really right by the horse. It's a lifestyle. Like you have to, who you are is how you ride.
Yeah.
And that is, they say, well, your horse is a mirror to your soul. Well, that is why it's going to, they show you who you are. And sometimes that is not the reflection you wanted to see. And then you have to face that, which is not easy. And they're going to do that every single day because they're completely authentic and they can't make things up, which is a gift. And also, I'd love my horse to lie to me just a little bit. Right. Sometimes I'm just not quite ready for that truth. But my horse doesn't care about that. No. He's going to show me anyways.
Nope.
Which is also beautiful.
Yeah, the fact that they don't care about you or your feelings is really a gift because it really does mean that you know that what they are telling you is exactly how they feel about the situation. They're not trying to manipulate you. They're not trying to lie to you.
No. You're
just here and you get to choose how you face that and interact with that.
Yeah, and I think that we end up, why do we do this crazy thing that's like in every other measure completely irrational? It's like, why do we do it? Well, I think because the kind of connection that you end up with in that process, and I'm not going to say at the end because there's really no end, but the connection that kind of very slowly grows out of that kind of engagement is very unique and very special. And I think, we can talk about, well, we're not going to talk about politics, but one could talk about politics and one could talk about culture and being an American with social media and talk about how connected we are, but also how disconnected we are. And I think notice that it is more difficult to be in really deeply authentic connection. And that is your only choice with a horse. Mm-hmm. You will be in a deeply authentic connection.
Period.
With your horse. And it may be authentically awful.
Yeah.
For a while. And that, I think, is why some people walk away. But I think the people who stay with horses in part because it is so, so motivating to find that kind of connection. And the joy of movement, right? I think that's the other thing that motivates people to be with horses, is that they, like humans, I think, enjoy movement and are just innately curious. And so I think when we embark on this journey with the horse, with that in mind of finding the joy of movement and just continuing to be curious, it's very fun.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting the choice that you mentioned of we are choosing to do this every day. We show up and we choose to do this and we choose to look at this and we choose to be on a never-ending journey.
Yeah.
And when I started riding more seriously in middle school, I also started doing archery, and I was pretty just innately good at it. I was quite good at it, and my instructor really wanted me to start doing some competitions. And my father does not like horses, and he thought that I should choose archery. But I had to choose. They were two major time investments, and I had to choose which one. And my father was like, please, can we walk away from the horses now? Can we do archery? Maybe? And I chose horses, obviously. Here I am. And yeah, I did walk away from the thing that I was kind of just innately good at to do the thing that I have never been innately good at and have always had to work exceptionally hard for, because it's fulfilling and it feels good and it makes you work hard. And I don't know many people who have a better work ethic than horse people who are doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you do have to show up. Really show up. Show up every day with who you are.
Yeah. Not to sound corny, but when I decided to start putting my phone on Do Not Disturb before I came into the barn, it got better. Everything got better. Bringing my whole self in.
Totally. Totally. And that is a whole nother podcast.
It's a whole nother conversation.
About how do you show up? What does that even mean? What does that look like?
I'm sure that we will talk about it at some point.
I'm sure we will.
A little bit more. But I think this is the end of this episode.
Yeah. I think that kind of introduces the idea of what we're trying to do here.
And I hope it resonates.
Yeah.
With you, whoever's listening to this in the future.
Friend.
Hello, new friend. Join our conversation. I think this will be really cool. And I think that we've talked about, if this resonates with people, setting up some sort of Facebook group to connect people who want to have these conversations too. So very much looking forward to seeing how this is received. Also, huge shout out to my friend and professional acquaintance, Sophie Wagner, who is doing sound editing for us. Absolute lifesaver. I came to her and said, I don't know anything about podcasting. Can you help me? And she said, absolutely, of course I can. So thank you, Sophie.
Yes, thank you, Sophie.
You're the best. And we'll be back later.
See you next time.
Thanks for joining us this week at the Horse Girl Gazetteer. You can find us online at Horse Girl Gazetteer on Facebook or Instagram, and you can listen wherever you find your podcasts. You can also email us questions or comments at horsegirlgazetteer@gmail.com. Georgia can be found at Equine Virtual Assistant on Instagram and Facebook, and Kate can be found at Hideaway Acres on Facebook and Hideaway Acres Horse Farm on Instagram. If you found yourself enjoying our content, please leave a review to help others find their way to us. We appreciate any and all support. Talk to you later.